Whatever.
Canon just released two
Old
new
school?
two new mirrorless cameras.
New school. Do you really need it?
Do you really need it?
I don't know.
Is it worth the money? Should you upgrade? Should you not? All right. So you say some stuff,
Okay.
and then I'll say some stuff, and then I'm gonna be like, roll the intro.
This is the old camera.
And this is a sort of a newer, but not the newest one. Hold on. Wait.
I basically started having children about the same time that mirrorless cameras became a thing, so I don't really know much about them, but he knows everything about them, which is why I'm not doing this video by myself.
Hello. Hold on. Okay, I'm gonna start this one actually. Okay, are you ready?
Okay, yeah.
All right. Hello, Katelyn's YouTube. We are here today to talk about mirrorless cameras. Last week, Canon announced two brand new mirrorless cameras, and the internet is abuzz, and everyone wants to know, what does Katelyn James think?
And everyone also wants to know what Tyler thinks, because what Tyler thinks eventually is what I think, because I don't research this stuff.
Exactly, so we're here today to kind of go through that process with you and let you know what we think.
Yeah.
Roll the intro.
Hey there, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Katelyn James, and this is a place where we empower photographers to build profitable and purposeful businesses while also letting you in on a little behind the scenes of our everyday life.
Now, normally I am behind the camera, but I am in front of the camera today because we're going to be talking about gear. But I know not everybody out there who watches this channel may be really big into tech or whatever. You may see all these specs from these new cameras and say, what does that mean? What does that mean to me? Do I need to buy these cameras? All those different things. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna kind of run through all the different specs of these two new cameras that have been announced, and I'm gonna kind of run them by Katelyn, and she's gonna give me her reaction. She doesn't really know a ton about these cameras, to be honest.
No.
She hasn't done a lot of research into them,
No.
whereas I've spent the last week doing nothing but researching them. So we're gonna kind of talk about them in two different ways, from kind of like a technical perspective, what these cameras have to offer, what makes them different, and then Katelyn will give you sort of her reaction as a veteran wedding photographer, as how these specs actually would or would not impact her on a wedding day. Okay, so for those of you who missed it, Canon released two new mirrorless cameras last week. So the two cameras are the Canon R6 and the R5. Now these are the predecessors to the Canon EOS R, which I have right here, which was Canon's kind of like first mirrorless camera. And you can see here that compared to Katelyn's 5D Mark IV, that it is significantly smaller, and there's just like some pros and cons to mirrorless, which we're gonna go into, but it is a full frame. This is a full frame mirrorless camera. These new ones are kind of like the pro version of this. So let's run through some of the different specs of these new cameras that were announced. The R5 is the more expensive, full like pro featured camera, and the R6 is a little bit less expensive and is the kind of like prosumer, but still has a lot of pro features in it, okay?
And what's the difference? Are we talking like a $1,500
Oh yeah, so let
difference?
me give you the rundown. Okay, so the R6 is gonna be retailing at $2,499, so $2,500, whereas the R5 is basically $3,900. So it's a $1,400 price difference. And to put that in perspective, the 6D Mark II is around $1,400. The 5D Mark IV is the exact same price as the R6, so $2,500. And then the Canon 1DX Mark III, which these two new cameras share the same sensor and a lot of technology with, is $6,499. So they kind of fall, they're not the cheapest cameras, neither of them are the cheapest by any means, and the R5, which is like the pro one, is actually significantly more expensive than buying a brand new 5D Mark IV or the R6. So we're talking about a $1,400 price difference here.
And I just want to say, as I have changed my camera setup that I've used, I have just followed the 5D progression.
Right. So you've been on 5Ds for forever.
I started with the 5D, just a 5D. Then
really, original 5D?
I had the original.
Wow.
I think I still have it in the office.
That's awesome.
Yes. It wasn't worth much, so we just kept it for like a museum one day.
Yeah.
So then I did the Mark II. Then I did the Mark III.
Yep.
Now I have the Mark IV.
Right.
So this is a big deal because it's kind of, to me, it feels like if I were to switch, it feels like I'm entering into a whole new family. I'm not like changing to Sony or going from Canon to Nikon, but it seems like I'm changing it up. And it's a big change.
Right, so let's jump in. So the first big spec that everyone always looks at is the megapixels of the sensor. So the R5 has a 45 megapixel sensor. The R6 has a 21 megapixel sensor, and the 5D Mark IV has a 31 megapixel sensor. So what does that mean to you?
What that means to me is, the first thought I had was, would you ever fully see the difference? And have I ever really needed more megapixels with my Mark IV? Never.
Right.
I've never thought that.
I'm going to throw up a chart here that shows how big you can print things with these different megapixel sensors.
Yes.
But basically, all you need to know is that, like, yeah, even with a 20 megapixel sensor, which is the same sensor that's in the 1DX, which is a $7,000, it's like the cream of the crop sports news, like whatever camera, is a 21 megapixel sensor. So
why would you need more than that?
Right. Well, so the disadvantage of having a really big sensor size is that it takes up a lot more memory, right?
Yes.
So if you normally are used to shooting with 64 gig cards, and now you jump up from 31 megapixels to 45.
Right.
I'm not good at math, but you're going to be filling your cards up, 20% faster, maybe 30% faster than you would. So you need that much more hard drive space. And if you're doing 6,000 images per wedding, like somebody does.
It's not always 6,000.
Sometimes it is.
No.
That's a big difference. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of gigabytes of a difference per wedding, potentially.
And it's not even necessary.
So sensor-wise, between the two, the R5 and the R6, I think you could be fine with both. And honestly, that's the biggest difference between the R5 and the R6. We'll go through the rest of them here. It's going to be the megapixels. Is the 45 megapixels in the R5 and the 21 megapixels in the R6.
So people are paying $1,400-ish more just to have more megapixels?
There's a few other little nuancy differences, but for the most part, yeah. So the biggest difference, I should have said this from the beginning, in both of these cameras is the video specs. So as a video guy, we're not going to get into that too much in this video, but the video specs is what people are really all a buzz about. So in the wedding filmmaker world, literally the whole wedding filmmaking world is on fire right now because everyone's so talking about these cameras and what they can do. But we're talking only about photography here, obviously for this channel, because this is going to be relevant. So that's why I think that for photographers, it's actually less of a debate. There's less of a discussion to be had.
Yes.
But I think the real big question is going to be, should you go mirrorless at all?
Yes.
Coming from a DSLR?
It's less of a discussion between the R5 and the R6 and more of a discussion of, do I need to sacrifice giving up my Mark IV to go mirrorless? That's the big debate, I think, for wedding photographers. And it's the debate for me.
Yes. Okay, so let's keep running through the specs and this will help you. Okay, so the R5, the ISO range is 100 to 51,200.
Oh my gosh.
The R6 doubles that, so the max is 102,400, whereas on the Mark IV, the max is 32,000. Now, obviously you're never going to be shooting things at 32,000 ISO. It means that at 8,000 ISO, theoretically, the R6 will be that much cleaner than the R5. Does that mean anything?
And that I think makes a difference. It's way more of a difference between the megapixel thing. I'm I don't care about that. But if the sensor is literally doubled in sensitivity, then in my opinion, that is a big difference.
Because then theoretically you could shoot at 12,000 ISO and get away with it. But again, for weddings, I don't know when you're ever going to need that.
I don't ever shoot at 10,000 ISO. The highest I ever go, a wedding I just put on KJ All Access, I shot a ceremony and I had to use my 7200. We were stuck in the balcony, super dark. I think I shot a few images, or Michael did it, 6400. And that's honestly the highest we ever go.
Right.
Ever.
Well, this actually brings me to the next point, which is both of these cameras, the R5 and the R6, have in-body image stabilization, also known as IBIS. So if you ever see that floating around, that's what that means. In-body image stabilization, which, do you even know what that does?
Basically,
not to put you on the spot, but
No, but basically would it take what the IS stabilization for a lens, but it puts it within the camera.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you have image stabilization in your lens, there's a mechanism inside your lens that is basically analyzing the shake, the movement of your hand, and it's counteracting it to give you a smoother shot, even if you're moving or whatever, right? So basically what this is doing is it's moved from the lens into the actual sensor of the camera. So the sensor actually has some movement to it. So now this makes more of a difference, I think, for video. But for photography, that is helpful when you're doing things like macro shots, when you're doing, if maybe you're in a really dark ceremony and you have to have a kind of a low shutter speed or whatever, and you're trying to make sure you're not getting any camera shake, all these different things. So the in-body image stabilization just means every single lens that you put on your camera is going to be stabilized. And you don't have to do anything. It just automatically does. You're not losing any quality because it's completely a mechanical process. So
to me, I guess I've never thought to myself, man, I can't wait for Canon to come out with more image stabilization.
Right.
I've never needed it. So, when you think about it, is a cool feature.
It's nice for lenses like a 70-200. Anything you're shooting that's a long lens, right? It helps you just make sure that you're that much more stable. But obviously, if you're shooting at the right shutter speed, you're not going to worry about camera shake because you won't have to deal with it. But the only time it would help you, I would say, again, if you're in a dark church, something like that with the 70-200, and you need to have a base shutter of 1/400th, right, to
Right.
make up for it. This will help you if you want to drop it down to 1/125th or 1/100th.
But here's the thing, that is still kind of risky. And so for me, I'm like, even if I bought this mirrorless camera for the sake of, oh man, the image stabilization is awesome, I still wouldn't change my best practices of shutter speed, like how
Right.
low I want to go. I would never change that just because I have more image stabilization. So that kind of, to me, that kind of like negates.
Right. Well, and because you have the higher ISO range, so it'd
Right.
probably be better at this point just to raise,
your
maybe
ISO.
go to 10,000 ISO and stay at 1/200th versus the way around. So anyway, okay. So they both have a Digic X processor, which is the same processor that's in the 1DX.
No idea what that means.
Doesn't really mean, it just means it's how fast it can process things and how clean the image is. It's going to be good. This probably doesn't mean anything to you either. The R5 and the R6 both shoot 12 frames per second with the mechanical shutter, whereas the 5D Mark IV shoots 7 frames per second. Doesn't really make much of a difference, but what's interesting is it does 20 frames per second with a silent shutter. And just the fact that there is a silent shutter is an interesting fact that you can only have with a mirrorless camera. So do you ever see a time where
Fully
you would
silent.
want, it's completely silent. It does not make a single
That's nice.
sound. It's essentially like you're shooting video and then you're just like taking, but it's actually capturing,
Yeah.
an image. So it's completely silent. Do you ever feel like you're being intrusive with the mechanical shutter?
Well,
on a wedding day?
I do use, for my Mark IV, I do put it on silent shutter in some very echoey church silent situations where I do feel like I'm being a distraction. I will put it on silent
Right.
mode.
But it's more like a
it's-
quiet
Yes, it's
shutter.
not silent.
Right.
It is not silent.
Right.
So I have had moments. Don't know if there's been enough moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for a new camera that's
Right.
completely silent. But I would use that and I would take advantage. I would like that feature if I did have one.
As a videographer, I would love it if more people had this for when we're reading vows or reading notes and stuff like that before the wedding day, so I don't have
Yeah.
like the loud shutter going during my audio.
I will
but
say,
that's
I have to pay attention to that. I try to be very cautious whenever
Right.
we're shooting together and someone's reading a note. I take a quick shot before the audio kind of begins, and then I wait till the end because I know that's a big pain for him. So maybe I need mirrorless just to make Ty's life better. For like
That
the
would-
3 weddings a year we shoot together.
hey, that's like half of our weddings every year, so I don't
Okay.
know. The one thing I will say about shooting with the silent shutter, which I have noticed with the EOS R, is that you can get some weird banding issues depending on the lighting in the room. So it's just like one thing, it's not the perfect solution. Outside, it would be great.
Yeah.
20 frames per second is kind of cool. Not really practical for wedding stuff, but that is pretty impressive that you can shoot 20 frames per second completely silently. But here's the one KK that I think will actually potentially impress you. Okay, autofocus points. The autofocus system on these mirrorless cameras is one of the big advantages to going mirrorless in general. Listen to this. Okay, this camera right here
Yes.
that you've been shooting forever
Mark IV.
has 61 autofocus points.
Yes.
41 of which are cross type, and you
Yes.
only really want to use the
Only
cross
use
type.
those.
So 41 autofocus points.
Yes.
Do you want to guess how many this one has?
No, just tell me.
1,053.
Oh my.
There are
gosh.
autofocus points on every single part of the sensor, from corner to corner, edge to edge.
Now-
So it's different in that with the DSLRs, right? You have you see the physical points. This is literally, it's like a touch screen like your iPhone. So you just touch wherever you want the focus to be, or you have a joystick so you can move your autofocus point around. But you literally move it anywhere on the screen. And
because there's so
it's in
many,
focus.
it's you, yeah. And
Right.
so my question, I think, to that would be, that's great to have so many focal points, and the approach to focus completely changes with this.
Sure.
If it is as accurate as the 41 the cross type AF points on here, then I'd be really interested in it because that sounds like I could even get I mean, I'm pretty fast as it is,
Right.
but I could get it even faster and more accurate.
So listen to this. So on top of that, not only does it have that many autofocus points, but it has eye, head, and face detect. So not only can it detect where like their actual faces are for you, somewhat automatically, you have some control over, you can say like, you can have zone control and things like that, but it also has eye detect. So instead of when you focus
Yeah.
on someone's face, a lot of times you'll focus on their nose maybe or on their cheek and their eye will be slightly out of focus.
Right.
It can specifically pick out the eye and will always prioritize the eye over anything else.
So now I have a question about that.
Yep.
Let's say you're doing a shot where you have a bridal party lined up, but you bring the bride and groom out in front and they're sharing a kiss, but everyone else is looking towards the camera. So the bride and groom's eyes aren't as noticeable, but everyone in the back is smiling and it notices it. Can you turn that feature off? And would you have to turn it off?
I'm sure you can turn it off. I don't know specifically because I've obviously never shot with these cameras,
Yes.
but that is one of those things where
have
obviously
to test
anything
it
that's
out.
auto will always have some limitations.
Yes.
But in like normal portrait scenarios, that does sound great. I know that it does on like the video cameras that I use that have the head and face detection. It shows a box over their faces and you can kind of click you can say, this is the one I want to prioritize, things like that. So it may be a little bit of like a workflow adjustment when you get it. But I do think that eye detection thing, Sony has it in a couple other different cameras, and there's other manufacturers that have it.
Right.
And it's really, really powerful. And this is actually a new, so Canon is known for having come with some of the best, it's called the dual pixel autofocus system. It's kind of the best in the industry. And this is actually the version 2 of that. So it's actually like an upgraded version completely with all this new stuff. And it's actually supposed to learn, it's like, it has, intelligence to a certain extent, where it's like learning more about like the different faces.
I feel like it just went from cool to a little creepy.
Yeah. So anyway, but that to me is like the biggest selling point for going just from a DSLR to mirrorless in general is that autofocus system. Is that because it literally is just like an iPhone. You can touch anywhere on the screen.
That's crazy.
Or you can, like I said, it does have like the joystick and all that stuff on the back. So that's really interesting.
So my thought on that is impressive to me. You're right. That's impressive. But if I was to switch, I'd have to be okay with kind of relearning and readjusting to a new focus system that is potentially better and more powerful, but it is completely different than the past.
And you don't have to do that. It also has the ability to do a single point, and you can just put the point, the difference is you can put the point anywhere you want on the whole screen. Because I know that you like to focus and recompose, but if you're shooting a big epic wide shot with a couple at the bottom, you will be intentional about moving your focus point down to the bottom of the sensor.
But the reason I focus and recompose is because when I'm shooting with my Mark IV, I know that not all of there's not enough AF points to always be exactly where I want it. So I place it and then hold and recompose. So with this, I don't know if I would ever focus and recompose, because why would I?
Right, you wouldn't really need to.
If you truly have great focal ability with all the points.
Yes.
Now, if I was shooting a lot and I realized with certain lenses, like, hey, if I tap over here, it's just always soft, or like some are weaker than the other. And maybe as people start to use these cameras more and more, we'll start to learn more about like what are the negative sides of the focus system.
I will say that jumping from a 5D Mark III to the EOS R, and we don't shoot photo professionally anymore, but I still shoot a lot of photos with this camera. I will say that this camera is significantly always more accurate, sharper. I've just noticed a big improvement in focus clarity with the EOS R, which again has the older autofocus system. It doesn't even have this newer version. So that is a big difference.
I would say for photographers that are on the fence, if one of your frustrations with shooting with prime lenses and shooting with the Mark IV or the Mark III, even the Mark II, this, out of the whole list that he's explained, that's the number one reason why I think you should consider it.
Yes. I agree. Okay, let's keep moving. There's a couple other things we got to get through. Okay, so the R5 and the R6 both have dual card slots, which is good. So the EOS R only has a single card slot. So it's kind of been why it's been ruled out from a lot of wedding photographers up until this point. However, mostly because of video features, the R5, the two different card slots are a CF Express card and an SD card. All you need to know is that it's a really fancy card that can write really, 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 really fast in order to keep up with a lot of the video features on this camera. However, it's extremely, extremely expensive. Like whatever you're used to paying for memory cards, double it, sometimes triple it. That's how much these cards cost.
So you switch to mirrorless, you get the R, it's the same for R5 and R6.
So the R6, however, has 2 SD card slots.
Interesting.
Yes.
So you only have to pay to shoot double with the R5, and that's the only time.
And that's the more expensive camera.
So that probably makes people say, well, I'll just save money over time, just spend the $1,400, use the SD cards I already have.
Right, exactly. SD cards are cheap. They're pretty easy to find. These are faster, higher quality, like the version 2 SD card slots. So some of the SD cards you have may not work, but in general, the SD cards are significantly cheaper.
And they're affordable,
they're much more affordable,
and they're more common.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So that is because you have to get different card readers, like because you have like a 4 stack of CF cards, of card readers, and you have a bunch of CF cards. None of those would work in this camera, in either one of these cameras.
Right.
So that's just something to notice.
That part of my workflow.
It is an expense to consider.
Great.
Next thing, so another pro of mirrorless is that instead of when you look through a DSLR, you're looking through a series of physical mirrors, and what you're seeing is like actually out the lens. So you're just seeing optically what is in front of your lens. You're not seeing, when you adjust shutter or aperture or anything like that, you're not seeing any of that reflected in what you're looking at when you look through the camera. But with a mirrorless camera, since there is no mirror box, it's mirrorless, what you're looking at is a screen. So you put your eye up to the viewfinder, you're looking at an actual screen. So this is another big difference between the R5 and the R6. The R5 EVF is 5.6 million dots, which again, doesn't really matter, but the R6 is 3.69 million dots. So all you need to know is that the R5 electronic viewfinder is significantly denser pixels, it's more high quality, so it's going to be.
Okay, I just want to ask, why didn't Canon just make one, right?
Well, from a video perspective, they're very, very different.
Oh.
And from a pricing, I mean, I guess they're trying to hit different price points. But like this is a big. Why did they put the same EVF in both? That I don't really know. I can't tell you. So I'm assuming that the EOS R is more similar to the R6 in terms of dots. I've never really noticed a difference. But the cool thing is that when you're looking through the EVF on either one of these cameras, when you adjust your shutter, you adjust your aperture, and you're doing anything, you literally see it physically in your eye. You can also see a lot more information. So you can actually have like things like histograms if you wanted, or how much memory, like you can see all of your settings and all of your things, and you can customize it, which you can or can't.
So would you say that when you are switching to mirrorless, a lot of like what we call chimping and looking at the back doesn't really happen anymore?
Correct, right, exactly. Especially once you get used to the EVF and like knowing, because it's obviously a little bit different than looking at the actual back of the screen.
Yes.
But once you get used to what you're seeing with the EVF, you know exactly what you're going to get exposure-wise before you shoot the shot.
Which,
so that is nice.
Honestly, I would say beyond the focus ability, this is really interesting to me because I think so many photographers get in this rush of they shoot so fast and they get so nervous, and then they get back later and they're uploading, they're like, I was so off. I had no idea I was so off. And I have to believe that as you're looking through, because you're seeing what you're shooting in like its final format, you would have to be less likely to make huge mistakes.
Right, exactly.
Which on a wedding day, again, I mean, I'm starting to come to the other side. I'm starting to see, like on a wedding day, you have less chance of butchering a once in a lifetime moment when you can see what you're actually showing. So you're not going to end up in a situation where, oh my gosh, this was so overexposed, I can't even save it. Or this is so underexposed, when I try to fix it in Lightroom, there's so much grain. You probably won't run into that because you have such different, more advanced capabilities while you're shooting.
Yeah, which is really nice. I mean, that is one of the best things about mirrorless. And again, pros are like, oh, I don't need it. Like, I need to learn to do the settings the correct way or whatever. But like, yeah, I mean, it makes a difference.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
This is another reason why, I don't know if you're gonna get to this, but my fear is if this is the future, like this is where we're all headed eventually, then I don't want to be the photographer in that mindset of like, oh man, but the way we used to do it, that's how people, and I'm not talking about the modern day film photographers, I'm talking about like the Uncle
Old
Bobs
school.
that are like, I remember back in the day, you know, if you don't know how to use a light meter, you're not a photographer. I can imagine if eventually I don't make a shift like this and I'm not open to new possibilities, then 15, am I still gonna be shooting 15 years from now? I don't know. But I don't
shooting something.
I don't want to be the girl that like completely blocked off this. I don't want to miss the boat.
And I think, and the thing that's interesting is I think this is where Canon is interested in putting their like R&D and like they're supporting this going forward. So I think that if you don't make the choice to get, you're going to get left behind regardless, because they're just going to stop making lenses for these cameras, which we'll get to lenses in 2 seconds. That's the last thing we're going to talk about. Okay, so quick little couple things to run through. The screen on these is a flip screen like this. Whereas on the 5D Mark IV, there is no flip screen, so it actually, which is nice because I know how you shoot on reception.
This is touch.
It is touchscreen. Sorry, it is touchscreen, but it's not articulating.
Yes.
Which I know how you shoot on reception sometimes, KK. It's nice because you can hold it above your head.
You don't do it that often, but I do it sometimes. Yes.
But you can hold things above your head for maybe a wide ceremony shot, but you want to have like a higher angle to get the mountains, anything like that. You can just put this above your head. You can articulate it. You can turn it any which way. If you do any sort of video, YouTube stuff, whatever, it is nice to have this turn around so it faces towards you. Or if you like to do, selfies like Abby Grace or whatever, it's just nice to have an articulating screen. Shout out Abby Grace. It's nice to have an articulating screen, and it's touch and all those different things, and it's still weather sealed. So that is nice. So the R5 and the R6 are both weather sealed. Meaning
pouring down rain in a ceremony, it's not the end of the world.
Right, yeah. You can take it out in pretty significant amounts of rain. You can't drop it in a pool, but it can get pretty wet, and you should be fine. As long as your lens is also weather sealed. Not all lenses are weather sealed.
I didn't know that, so that's good to know.
On the R, hold this for a second. See on the back here how they have this weird slidey thing?
Yes.
And they've got this instead of the circle?
Yes.
Right? Well, so they got rid of that on the R5 and the R6. They brought back the spinny wheel and the joystick, just like you have on your 5D4, which is nice.
So that would feel somewhat familiar.
Yes. On the R here, see on the top here, there's an LCD screen on the top of here. That is only on the R5. The R6 has a mode dial. but it doesn't have a top screen, which is
Oh.
interesting. But again, if you're looking through the EVF, you can see all of that information.
All your settings?
All of your settings. You can see, you can customize
see your
the
settings
EVF.
on your screen too?
Yeah, you can
Okay.
customize the screen to either be live view or you can set it to be just like
As
you have
long as you
yours.
were able to see like what's the aperture set at.
You just can't look at it on the top of the screen like you
Okay.
can on this one. The R5 does have this little LCD screen on here, which is kind of nice. But it's, that's one of the other like physical differences,
Yes.
but they do both have the joystick and the spinning wheel, which to me is the biggest difference. Because that's the one thing I don't like about the EOS R shooting photos with it, is adjusting the autofocus points is tricky without the joystick. So I do a lot of touching.
Yes.
And then you're kind of like taking your head off to like touch the autofocus point, and sometimes my nose hits it and it moves or whatever.
Oh, yeah, that's
But you won't have to
strange.
deal with that when you have the joystick back. You can
Because
just
if
like
you're
push it
going,
around.
you think about it, if you're going to use the touch feature, then you have to be holding your camera away.
Correct, right. So it's just like a new way of looking. So that used to be like really frowned upon, was like, oh, you're using live view, like you don't know what you're doing, like blah, blah, blah. But it's
Right.
kind of more, because it shoots the same in live view. You could shoot the whole thing in live view and it would look just as good. It's kind of like, again, it's like shooting with your iPhone. Like that's just the way that you do it.
There is a part of me that doesn't like that idea.
Well, you don't have to. You can
Well, if I
completely
did
turn
use
off.
it,
You can
I
turn
would
off
just
the
have to
live
get
view.
really fast with the toggle.
Yeah, you can turn off the live view.
How fast is the toggle? Is the toggle like this? Because moving this is kind of slow.
I think you can adjust the speed.
Oh,
Don't hold me to that, but I think that you have some adjustability with the speed. What I usually will do is I'll get it in the right spot by touching it, like in the general area that I want
And
it,
then
and then
move
I'm
it.
making micro adjustments
Okay.
with the thing on the back. So
It
there's
is a lot to learn. It does seem like a lot to learn, but
It would definitely
not
be a
against
muscle
it.
memory. It would frustrate you from a muscle memory.
I've been doing this for 12
Right.
years.
Yeah, so it's definitely, but I think that there's definitely, again, we're talking about like, is it worth going through that change? Okay, last couple of things.
Yes.
It uses the same batteries, which is nice. So you
That
wouldn't have
is-
to buy any new batteries.
that is great.
Exact same batteries. They have some newer
That
batteries.
seals the deal.
They have some newer batteries that you can buy that are actually, they're the same size and everything. They're just more efficient.
They always have a new
Somehow
version of
they're like
everything.
14% more efficient. I don't really know how. Okay. Last thing, this is like the big kicker everyone wants to know about is lenses, right? Because
Yes.
obviously lenses is a huge deal.
How much is the adapter?
So the adapter is only $99. So this right here, so the mount that is on the R series lenses is called the RF mount, whereas it's the EF mount on the
Mark
DSLRs, right? So it has to do with like the flange distance and all these different things. But all you need to know is just a different mount. However, Canon does sell a little adapter. It looks just like this. And this one right here is only $99. So this will make it so you can use all of your EF lenses
Yep.
on your R
Do
series
you
lenses.
lose quality because
No.
of that?
So because it is a Canon lens, this is one of the best things that Canon did, and it's actually probably one of the only reasons that this whole mirrorless thing is actually even going to be viable, is there's absolutely no loss in quality. So I haven't seen any sort of a difference. Again, I've actually seen more sharpness and more, accurate focus going from the 5D Mark III, which again is different than the 4, but they're pretty close,
Right.
to the EOS R, even with the adapter. I don't have any RF lenses, so I can't really say I can compare them side by side, but it does make it so that if you have a bunch of EF lenses like Katelyn does, you can use all of your same lenses on here. It does add a little bit of size.
Yes,
Obviously it would be smaller not to have that.
Right.
But another weird thing about the RF lenses, which are the ones they do have a line of RF lenses they're starting to develop specifically for these cameras, so you don't need an adapter. However, what's weird about them is that they're huge. Like you would think it's a small little mirrorless camera. Surely they're gonna make these, small little lenses so you have this tiny little camera package. But for whatever reason, the lenses are significantly larger than the EF versions. And they're more expensive. So listen to this here. Okay, so the 50 millimeters, so if you buy a 50 millimeter 1.2 for the EF, the one that we all love and hate,
This one's better.
$1,300. The RF version is $2,300. $1,000 difference. And then,
so why would people choose this? Because you don't have to have the adapter.
so there are some interesting things about them. They claim that they can focus faster, and that the reason they're going with this RF mount is because it allows them to have this new technology and do all this stuff. And I mean, the EF mount is 25, 30 years old, so I guess that kind of makes sense.
Right.
I
they gotta
personally
get these
haven't seen, and they're
prices
supposed to
down.
be sharper and whatever, but they're also, again, they're significantly bigger. And they're much more expensive.
Yes.
The 24 to 70 that we have right here, $1,600 for the EF, $2,300 for the RF. So it's not it's a couple $100. We're
No.
talking $1,000 or more
That's a lot.
of difference. So what I would say is that, like, I think and there's aren't very many lenses in this lineup. I think they just announced 3 more, so I think they're now up to maybe 15 or something in that general range.
Sounds like
total.
a lot to me, but
there's like 80 to 100 for the EF or whatever.
Right.
Like, think about it. If you want to get like the 50 millimeter, there's a 1.8, a 1.4,
Yes,
a 1.2.
There's not as much variety.
Right, there's not as much variety.
Okay.
So I think that, again, in the next 10 years, they're going to stop making EF lenses eventually, start making all RF lenses. And eventually it'll get to that point where there's a ton of variety for the RF. But in the meantime, the adapter really makes a huge difference, and it makes it completely viable.
Do you think that the price will go down eventually when they're not as new?
Yes, I think as time goes on, not only will they make more affordable options, and there are a few affordable ones. Like, these are just the L series, like top of the line ones.
Yes.
There are a few affordable ones, but again, then you're not in that pro. They're not considered pro lenses,
So if you're going to get started with the mirrorless, you got to invest in the body. And you got to invest in potentially some more cards.
Yep.
Definitely, for me at least, a new card reader, because I use CF cards with a backup SD in my Mark IV.
Right.
So, and you need to buy the adapter.
Right.
No new batteries unless you want the newer version.
Right.
But this is kind of something. It's something that I even at a professional level, with savings that we could purchase some new lenses. I don't think we would do that.
Right. No. At this point, to replace all of your lenses with RF lenses would be ridiculous. Even if you could sell all of your EF lenses, which you could, they hold their value pretty well.
Right.
It would be a pretty big investment. So what I think it's going to look like for a lot of people is buying this mirrorless camera over the next 10 years or so, slowly start like
their RF collection.
Buying an RF lens here or there. Right. Maybe you have a 50 1.4 right now, and whenever you make that L series jump, instead of buying the EFL, you buy the RFL, and you kind of start moving in that direction. But
all these names, they're just starting to.
Well, it all starts with the body.
Yes.
So that's all the kind of like relevant photo specs. Again, the video specs for these is like a whole, like I have a podcast episode about it. Selfless plug. If you want to listen to my podcast episode about it, I'll link it down below.
Don't listen to me.
Yes, I talked about all the video specs on it or whatever. But, okay, so Katelyn, hearing all of those different things, which are a lot of them are new to you, just learned them just now. There's kind of like two different camps. Somebody who has a 5D Mark IV, and these new cameras are coming out. You can go pre-order, like I said, you can go pre-order one right now. Would you suggest that somebody go sell a brand new, they just got a 5D Mark IV, and upgrade to one of these mirrorless cameras for, we're kind of in the middle of wedding season, but like for next wedding season?
No.
Probably not.
No.
Right.
I would say to someone who is really stepping up their professional game, they don't have a full frame camera, they don't have a backup camera, they're still shooting with a crop sensor that they started with when they started their career, and they really need to upgrade.
Or even like an old 6D or something like that's full frame, but it's like an older like prosumer kind of a camera.
I would seriously consider going mirrorless. And the reason for that is because I know for me, as soon as I purchase a new camera, I know like I am good for X amount of years.
Right.
Like I made this commitment, this investment for the longevity of my business. Even if I use it and for like 2 weeks and then sold it used, I'm going to lose money. It's like a car.
Used car. Yeah.
You can't get your full money back. So if you are about to invest and there's this new wave hitting the industry and reviews are great and it's really practical for a wedding photographer, I don't know if it'd be wise to like hook your, what's the phrase? Hook your hitch to this wagon. I don't know if that's the phrase.
That's a very country thing to say.
Well, I live in the country. I grew up in the country. I don't know if I would commit to that because you're committing for the next large chunk of years. 4 to 4 years, maybe.
5 years. The difference, the time it took from the 5D Mark III to the 5D Mark IV was, I think, 6, maybe 7 years between those two camera cycles, and that's pretty similar. That's pretty common for the Canon, cycles. I guess technically a 5D Mark V would be coming out eventually, but I don't even know. Because Canon has basically said they're really invested in like dedicated to this R series of mirrorless cameras. So yeah, I would say if you have a 5D Mark IV, odds are like you're not like leaving a wedding day like, man, my camera really let me down today, right? That's not really what's happening. Again, focus is the only area where you may be able to say that. Where you're like, man, some of these shots were a little bit off or I had to take a bunch more. But for the most part, from a photography standpoint, you're not going to see a huge like change in your life or like ROI jumping from the 4 to one of these mirrorless cameras like right now.
Right.
But if you were going to, like you said, if you're going to buy another 5D Mark IV to have one as like a backup, or if you're looking to buy your first like professional full frame DSLR,
Yeah.
I think that mirrorless, I would go mirrorless. I would make the shift now. I think like the sooner you do it, the sooner you get in the ecosystem, the sooner you can start building that lens lineup, all those different things, especially because all of your lenses transfer. If it wasn't that, if that wasn't the case, or if there was some quality loss
Absolutely not.
because of the adapters, then it would be a very different conversation. Or even like, again, with the EOS R, I would use this to shoot weddings if it didn't have a single card slot. Like there's like, you know, one thing like that can kind of kill the whole camera for weddings.
Yes.
But the R5 and the R6 definitely have both of those. Okay, so now someone's out here, they've decided, I'm gonna buy a mirrorless camera.
Which one do you get?
Which one do you get, the R5 or the R6? What do you think?
Honestly, I was thinking R5 until the card slot situation came up.
Right.
For something about the crazy expensive Express whatever card.
CF Express, yeah.
I don't love that, and I think that in a lot of ways it seems limiting to me. Like even if I invested in several of them, let's say something happened and I need to like run to Best Buy real quick and get one. Like gotta be able to afford it, and they're hard to find. I don't love that, and so to me it's worth it to invest in the R6 to not have to deal with that, and to almost not have to deal with the whole like. And yes, sure, it could be a backup card. You could record your main images, your RAWs, to your SD card, and it would be fine.
But even so, you mean if you want to have it recorded to 2 cards, you have to have one.
Yes.
So just for reference, so a 64 gig CF Express card is $109. So how many 64 gig cards do you think that you have?
I have all 32 gigabyte cards.
Okay, 32 gigabytes. Let's see.
And they are expensive though. I mean, that's not horribly off.
No,
they are expensive.
but you'd have to buy all brand new ones. Think about how many you have.
Yeah, I probably have 8 of them.
Right.
That's another, that's a lot.
So you're looking at $800-ish. So the difference between the R5 and the R6 is about $1,400 just to buy it. And then you're looking at probably $800-ish
for the new card.
Dollars just for new cards.
Now, if that was my backup though, but I don't know if it would be my backup because it's the fastest.
Right.
So then maybe this doesn't apply. I was saying if I...
You may not need as many cards right off the bat.
If it was a backup, then I wouldn't need as many cards. But if I'm going to record to it because I want to utilize the speed of it, then I would put my full-size image.
Well, I see what you're saying. So if you made it so that the RAW went on the SD card, but the JPEG...
Or a small RAW.
Or a small RAW or something went on the CF Express, you would need less. Right. But even still, you're already $1,400 plus a couple hundred. So you're looking at least close to $2,000 difference between the two.
And potentially, I mean, I have SD card readers. I would probably get a more advanced one if I switched to all SD cards, but I'd also have to buy an Express card reader.
The R6 and the 5D Mark IV are the exact same price.
Yes.
So that's interesting.
Yes.
So the big difference, again, some of you are like, why do these exist? Why are they even different? The R5 shoots 8K RAW internal video, which means probably nothing to you, but just like trust me when I tell you that's
absolutely nothing.
Really big deal, okay? So that's really where the big differences are.
That's why he has one ordered.
Right. Well, I have the R6, so I don't even need that. That's like more than I even need. Like I don't need 8K RAW internal, so that's why I bought the cheaper one.
He loves this stuff.
I do love this.
And
like we're shooting in 4K right now, and KK doesn't know what that means.
I don't really care.
That's fine. So in conclusion, I would say that if you're gonna buy a mirrorless camera, I personally think that the R6 is the way to go, unless for some reason you know you need those extra megapixels. You can justify the extra $2,000 you'll need to invest to use the R5. I personally think that for wedding photographers, most people out there, the R6 is the way to go. And again, we're talking about it like it's cheap. It's still not cheap. No. It's the same price as the 5D Mark IV. Granted, the 5D Mark IV is like however many years old. If you have a 5D Mark IV, maybe a couple 5D Mark IVs, and you're very content with your cameras and you don't have any problems and you don't really have the funds to upgrade, I don't think you need to run out and
buy a mirrorless camera
or do whatever.
No.
But I will say the next camera that you buy, whenever that happens, for whatever reason you end up deciding I'm buying a new camera today, I personally think that going the mirrorless route is the way to go.
And I would say, from our perspective, if you were to see a shift and start using one, it's not because we're going back on our word, because we fall into the category of, I'm very content with my Mark IV. But as an educator for thousands of photographers,
gotta get the content.
I got the content. No, but I don't want people in our Facebook groups asking big questions about mirrorless cameras, and I can't answer them for them. So for me, you might see us trying out the mirrorless camera and giving our feedback and owning one ourselves, but it's not necessarily because we were so unhappy with the Mark IV, and it's not because we think that every photographer needs a mirrorless camera and needs to invest in it. It's because we want to be able to help as many people as possible. And this honestly is one of the biggest gear shifts that I've experienced in
a long time,
in my whole probably time being an educator.
Oh, for sure.
So I don't. This isn't one of those things where it's like, oh, Katelyn, are you going to try out that new flash or this flash? It's like, I don't really care about that. I love my 600 EXRT flashes. I love those.
Yeah.
This is very different, and it's a much larger scale. And I think as an educator, I almost owe it to our audience to understand more about mirrorless, because that is going to be a trend that is moving forward and is more prevalent in our community. I just want to tell you, when this was announced, like when Canon did their big announcement, I think we were on the phone talking about something about, video we needed to do. And you're like, have you heard? I'm like, no, Ty, haven't heard anything. You're like, oh, it's all a buzz in KG Education in the Facebook group. Have you seen it?
I was leading the charge, that's right.
And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. He's like, KK, the new mirrorless Canon just announced. And I'm like, no clue. So if you had no clue, it's
totally fine.
Totally fine.
Yeah,
but
that's why we're here.
A lot of people in the YouTube community care about gear, want to know more about gear. And even though I don't necessarily research this on my own, I do care to know, and I do care about the advances in the technology that's happening in our industry. And I think everyone to some degree needs to care as well, because eventually, it may not be now or the next 3 years, but eventually if you don't care, you will be left behind.
And again, this camera's gonna be around for a long time. It's not like this camera is gonna be a fad, or they're gonna come out with a new one next year or anything like that. Canon doesn't work like that. So this mirrorless camera, the R5, the R6, they're gonna be out for a while. So this could be something that's relevant to you in a year from now, 2 years from now, when you go to make that decision. But again, you also want to be wise with your money, and it's a big investment to buy a camera. Like, it's important that you make an educated decision. So hopefully, again, if you're not super tech savvy, hopefully this helped kind of make it a little bit more down to earth, a little more understandable. Hopefully you feel better about it.
It was more understandable for me. He could talk about this stuff all day long. I'm like, let's talk about ring shots.
And at the end of the day, at the end of the day, if you buy this camera, it's not going to make you a better wedding photographer. No. It's not going to make your business better. It could eliminate some headaches. It could make your life better on a wedding day. But for for photography specifically, none of these cameras are going to make you leave you behind if you don't have one.
In general, this mostly applies, and I would pay attention to this if you're in the category or the season of your business. If you fall into this space of saying, I'm ready to upgrade and I don't know what to do. Yeah. So if that's you, this is something you should truly consider. If you're very happy with what you're shooting, you have no need to upgrade, then let's just hold off a little bit, I would say.
That's great. KK, I feel great. We should do this more often. All right, thank you all for watching.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe so you don't miss anything in the future.
The end.
We're done.